There are moments when even the Emperor's palace forgets to breathe. I remember standing before the golden throne, its vast machinery humming like the heartbeat of creation itself. The air trembled with sacred heat, each vent sighing incense thick enough to choke a mortal man. For 10,000 years, that sound had never ceased. The throne had been the pulse of humanity, steady, divine, unrelenting. And then, its tuttered. At first, it was almost nothing. A pause so small it could have been a trick of memory. The sacred conduits dimmed for the span of a breath. The light above the Emperor's corpse flesh flickering like the dying ember of a sun. Every custodian in the hall froze as if struck by the same impossible thought. It can't stop. The Mechanicus priests closest to the sanctum began their machine chants again, faster this time, voices cracking with panic beneath their masks. One of them turned his head slightly, toward me just slightly, and I saw the reflection of terror in the lenses of his reather. Then came the second pause, longer, colder. The lights dimmed again, and I felt the heat of the throne fade from my armor. The Astronomican's psychic hummed the song every soul in the Imperium feels, even if they do not know its source. Simply vanished. The silence was obscene. It was as though the universe itself had forgotten the sound of God. The custodian beside me whispered a prayer, the first spoken word in the hall of the throne in decades. His voice trembled, and I realized that even our perfect gene-forged hearts could know fear. My own Vox channel crackled with static. Orders, fragmented, screamed across channels, blinded. Navigators screaming blood into their hands. The black ships lost in the void. The Imperium had gone blind. The floor beneath me shuddered. The great pipes that fed the throne from the vaults below moaned, old metal bending under new strain. For centuries, we had whispered that the Emperor was not alive, but none of us had ever truly believed he could die. Now, the scent of promethium and burnt oil filled the hall, and the light of his halo burned low, blue instead of gold. I took one step forward, closer to the dais. My boots echoed too loud, to mortal in that eternal place. I saw the Emperor's face, pale and still beneath the web of cables and bronze. His eyes, those hollow sockets that had once seen through time itself, were dark. No golden flame, no psychic radiance, just emptiness. A custodian behind me dropped to one knee, his spear clattering against the floor. "My lord," he whispered, his voice breaking, forgive us, forgive us." Something deep within the throne shifted. A grinding, ancient sound, like stone splitting beneath oceans of pressure. From the vents below came a faint glow, not gold, but red. It pulsed, slow and rhythmic, not divine, but alive. I felt it beneath my armor, crawling up through the soles of my boots, through my veins, into my skull. The Astronomican's absence had made the warp hungry, and now that hunger had found a door. I raised my guardian spear, though I did not know against what. The light continued to fade. Somewhere in the palace, alarms began to wail, and as the glow beneath the throne turned from red to black, I realized I was not hearing the Emperor's heartbeat anymore. I was hearing something else, something that was waking up. The moment the sound began, it felt wrong. It wasn't the rhythmic thrum of machinery or the psychic hum of divine resonance we had known for millennia. It was deeper or organic, like something breathing beneath the metal of the throne itself. Every custodian turned toward the sound, their golden armor reflecting the flickering light of failing reactors. I remember the taste of ozone and ash in the air. The scent of burning incense couldn't hide the truth anymore. Something sacred had broken. The Mechanicus priests started screaming litanies into the data stream, their voices merging with the shrieks of dying servitors. Sparks rained from the throne's conduits, painting the marble floor in molten gold. I saw one priest pull the activation lever of the auxiliary reactor, but instead of light, black fire erupted from the base of the machine. The flames bent inward, devouring the air itself. Warp light, the same I had seen in the eyes of demons during the siege. My vox crackled again this time. A single voice cut through the chaos. "This is Custodian Val. Report what is happening." I opened my mouth to respond, but words failed me. How could I speak the truth? That the Emperor's light was dying. That the throne itself was bleeding shadow. Then, a blinding wave of psychic pressure threw me backward. I slammed into a pillar, armor scraping marble, helm ringing. My vision blurred, static dancing across my lenses. And through the interference, I saw it. Tendrils of darkness coiling from beneath the Emperor's seat, like veins of smoke reaching for the ceiling. For a heartbeat, I thought I heard whispers in that shadow-old voices, familiar yet impossible. Sanguinius, Horus, Malcador, names that should not have power. Anymore, the custodian nearest the throne shouted for the exorcists to seal the lower vaults. But his command was drowned beneath a thunderous roar. It wasn't sound, it was pressure. An invisible scream that pressed against the inside of my skull until I thought it would split. The throne's mechanisms came alive with spasms of violent spistans, jerking gears, tearing themselves apart. Lightning crawling along the frame like veins of agony. I staggered forward, my vision clearing enough to see the Emperor again. His body, what remained of it, was still bound in golden cables and bronze plating, but something behind him was moving. The air rippled around his form, like heat mirage or wings. I wanted to kneel, to pray, but no words came. Every hymn felt hollow, every oath meaningless. I could only watch as the light around the Emperor turned crimson, the throne now pulsing like a dying heart. The Mechanicus fell to their knees, some burning alive as their cogitators overloaded. Others wept binary tears, whispering apologies into dead vox links. I felt my armor vibrate as the custodians formed a defensive circle around the throne. Not against an enemy, there was none we could see, but against the feeling of being watched. Something vast and cold had turned its gaze toward Terra, not the Emperor. Something else from deep beneath the palace. Alarms screamed a breach in the sanctum vaults, the ones even we were forbidden to enter. Vox relays across the planet erupted in confusion, astropaths collapsing, navigators blinded, the Imperial Navy drifting without the The galaxy was coming apart in real time, and all we could do was hold our ground before a god who might already be dead. The throne shuddered once more, and the floor split beneath my feet. Through the widening crack, I saw movement, fluid, luminous, and wrong. Not metal, not fire. It was like the warp itself had found a mouth, and now it was breathing through terror. I looked back toward the Emperor, my hands shaking despite the weight of my armor. For the first time in 10,000 years, I spoke without ritual. "My Emperor," I whispered, "are you still there?" The silence answered, and somewhere in that silence, I heard laughter. It began as laughter, faint, mocking, almost human. It did not echo through the hall in any natural way. It came from everywhere and nowhere, carried by the trembling air like a sickness. I froze, every instinct forged in millennia of service, screaming that this was not possible. No one had laughed within these walls since before the siege. It was a sound that did not belong in the Emperor's presence. It did not belong in this world. The Mechanicus priests were no longer chanting. They had fallen silent, their voices stolen, their bodies trembling as the vox links on their robes sparked and died. The light from the failing conduits shifted again, gold to red, red to black. The air became thick, not with incense now, but with heat, with smoke, and with something else, something that tasted of iron and sorrow. I raised my guardian spear, though my arms felt as heavy as stone. The laughter deepened, turning into a chorus of whispers. They crawled through the hall like serpents, each word pressing against my mind, promising salvation or damnation. I could no longer tell. Around me, some of the custodians began to falter. One tore off his helm, gasping as though drowning, his eyes wide with terror. His name was Isla. I had trained beside him when the throne was young. He looked at me, his lips trembling, and I saw that his eyes were no longer gold but black mirrors. I reached for him, but before my hand could touch his armor, he screamed a terrible, breaking sound, and the black fire that had erupted from the throne swallowed him whole. His armor melted in silence, leaving only the shadow of his outline scorched into the marble. I stepped back, my breath ragged. The laughter returned, closer this time. "My sons," it said. The voice was not the Emperor's. It was layered, discordant, as though four voices spoke in unison, one proud, one mocking, one weeping, and one smiling through blood. I felt my knees threaten to buckle. The warp was bleeding into the world, and its chorus was mocking the faith of men. Across the chamber, a great explosion tore open one of the support walls. Light dark and alive poured through, warping reality itself. Statues of the Primarchs began to weep molten tears. The air shimmered with images that flickered too fast to understand. Burning planets, dead angels, the empty gaze of the void. Then the throne moved. Its massive frame groaned, gears twisting, pistons striking, like a beast straining against its own cage. The Emperor's body remained still, but his bindings rattled, the golden cables snapping one by one. Psychic lightning surged through the air, each flash accompanied by screams from the Mechanicus and the custodians alike. I saw the Emperor's hand twitch, just once, but it was enough to make my heart stop. For a moment, hope surged in Mira, desperate hope that he was awakening, that he would restore light to the galaxy. But then the hand fell still again, and that same red-black glow deepened beneath the throne, pulsing like the heart of something monstrous. I stumbled back as the floor began to quake. The laughter became thunder now, rolling through the palace, spreading beyond the sanctum. Across Terra, I could feel it, the panic, the confusion, the prayers shouted into a sky that no longer listened. The light of the Astronomican was gone, the throne was dying, and we, the guardians of eternity, were powerless to stop it. Then, through the roar, I felt the Emperor's voice, not spoken, not heard, but pressed into my soul. It was faint, fractured, filled with pain. "Do not let them in." The words seared through my mind like fire, and as the darkness swallowed the last of the light, I realized what he meant. The throne was not dying on its own. Something was trying to break through it. There are places beneath the Imperial Palace that even we, the custodians, are forbidden to tread. Vaults sealed before the birth of Guilliman. Corridors whispered about only in the rites of the Mechanicus. chambers where the stone itself remembers the siege. Those vaults now roared with life. The Emperor's command, "Do not let them in," still burned behind my eyes as I descended into the dark. The sound of failing reactors fading above me. The lower catacombs were lit only by the flicker of emergency lumen strips. Each step echoed with centuries of dust and prayer. My armor's servos whined softly. The machine spirits within seemed restless, uneasy. Every few meters, I passed a servitor, frozen mid-task, their eyes blind, their flesh sloughing off their augmetics. The throne's collapse had silenced them, and without the Emperor's light, even their minds had fled. Behind me, two custodians followed Valoran and Sarad. Their armor was scorched, their once golden plating now dulled by ash. "He spoke to you," Valoran said quietly. "You heard him." I nodded, my voice low. "A warning. Something is trying to come through the throne." Sarad's vox emitted a low hum, his tone grim. The throne was a bridge. If it breaks, it becomes a door. That thought lingered between us like the stench of oil. The throne had always been a paradox, a weapon, a prison, a beacon. And if the Emperor's essence faltered, what would stop the warp from rushing in to claim the hollow it left behind? The passage opened into an enormous chamber, Vault 33 Sigma, the deepest level below the sanctum. Here, ancient machines, older than the Imperium itself, loomed in silence. They were not built by the Mechanicus. They were remnants of the Dark Age, their inscriptions long eroded. Power conduits ran from the throne above into the walls here, pulsing faintly like veins. But now those veins throbbed with red light, not the pale gold of the Emperor's fire, but the taint of the warp. We approached the central dais. A great gate of black adamantium stood sealed with hundreds of purity seals, each one fluttering in the stale air. The inscriptions bore the sigils of the Sigillite himself, Malcador's work. Sarad's voice broke the silence. "These seals are dying," and they were. The parchment crumbled to dust, the wax symbols melting under invisible heat. As the last seal fell, the gate groaned. From beyond it came a sound, not like thunder, not like machinery, but the rhythm of breathing. Something alive, vast, patient. It inhaled through the metal and stone as if tasting the air of terror. Valoran raised his guardian spear, the weapon's emitter glowing white-hot. "We can't open this," he said. "We must reseal it, now." But I couldn't move. The psychic pressure against my skull intensified, and within it, a whisper, not the Emperor's voice this time, but another. Cold, gentle, serpentine. He kept us caged for 10,000 years. Now he sleeps. Let us speak. The vault shook violently. Runes ignited across the floor, circles within circles, demonic geometry that burned through the marble. The air turned liquid, heavy, alive. The warp was bleeding through reality itself. Valoran lunged forward, driving his spear into the center of the rune. Light exploded outward, banishing the red glow for only a second. But in that flash, I saw something on the other side of the gate. 4 silhouettes, one wreathed in flame, one dripping with rot, one shimmering like crystal, and one carved from impossible beauty. They were waiting, and they were smiling. Yes, ChatGPT said. Chapter 2, The Breach Beneath the Throne. Part 2 minus 590 words. The vault walls groaned as if the stones themselves were awakening. Valoran's strike had shattered part of the rune circle, but its light refused to die. Instead, It crawled up the walls like veins of molten glass, drawing symbols that burned too bright to look at. The heat rose, turning the chamber into a furnace. The air shimmered, and each breath scraped my throat like ash. Sarad backed away, his armor radiating heat. "They are pulling the gate apart from the other side." His voice trembled, not in fear, but in the realization of what that meant. The Emperor's prison was being undone, not by human hands, but by the will of gods. Valoran moved beside me, his spear raised high, its golden emitter still blazing white. "We can't hold them," he said, "but we can buy time." The words struck me harder than the quake underfoot. Buy time for what? The Astronomican was gone, the throne failing, the galaxy blind. Time was already a corpse we were dragging through the dark. Yet, hearing his resolve lit something in me. We were the Emperor's shadow, and even if his light had gone, we would not vanish quietly. We stepped forward, shoulder to shoulder, our weapons crackling with energy. The gate screamed as the first fissure tore through its center. From the rift spilled light, hues that defied reason. It hurt to see it. The warp itself was leaking through, bleeding into reality like water through a shattered dam. Then came the voice again. "Custodians," it hissed, smooth and mocking. "Do you know how many times he used your kind to kill for him? To burn for him? And now, when he needs you most, he cannot even speak your names." The chamber trembled with laughter echoes of 1,000 unseen mouths. I gritted my teeth and forced my mind to focus. "Ignore it," I said through clenched jaw. "They lie as they breathe." Sarad shouted over the roar. "The Emperor sealed them here himself. They will not leave while I still draw breath." He charged forward, striking the gate with his spear, channeling its power into the sigil. The light flared, a blinding flash that painted the chamber in holy fire. The shadows screamed, retreating for a moment. But then, from the other side, a shape pressed against the metal, a colossal hand made of fire and void, its claws dragging furrows into the adamantium. The gate buckled. Sarad's armor burst into flame as he stood defiant, refusing to fall. "Go," he bellowed. "Seal the upper vaults. Warn them." I stepped forward, but Valoran grabbed my arm. His grip was iron. "He's already dead," he said. The gate exploded outward. A tidal wave of force threw us across the chamber, metal and debris tearing the air apart. I hit the far wall, my armor cracking, and the world spun in red light and noise. Through the chaos, I saw Sarad vanish into the warp fire, his outline dissolving like dust in a storm. And then, for a moment, there was silence, again heavy, absolute. The gate was gone, the seals obliterated, the chamber filled with black mist and whispering light. From that darkness, a shape began to rise. Figure neither man nor demon, clothed in the broken symbols of all four chaos gods. Its voice was calm, almost gentle. "Your emperor is gone," it said. "Now you will remember his enemies." I tried to rise, my vision fading, but the last thing I saw was the reflection of that figure in Valoran's visor, its face shifting like a dream. Part flame, part rot, part beauty, part deceit, and it was smiling. The chamber was burning, yet no heat touched my flesh. The warplight was not fire as we knew it. It was corruption made visible. Energy that shimmered in defiance of every law the Mechanicus once understood. Valoran pulled me to my feet, his armor fractured, steam pouring from his shoulder plates. Through the chaos, I could hear the echo of millions of voices, prayers, screams. Laughter carried from the void itself through the rent in reality, now yawning where the gate had been, for a heartbeat. The darkness solidified. The four shapes that had stood beyond the breach began to shift, merging and unraveling like smoke caught in a storm. Their voices overlapped until they were one. "He held us apart," it said. "Now he falters. We will finish what he began." Valorant spat blood onto the floor. "Then you will face us first." He raised his spear and charged. I followed. The world bent around us, time itself twisting as we crossed the distance between us and the horror emerging from the rift. The floor melted into an ocean of symbols, each one glowing beneath our boots as though we walked on a living page of forbidden scripture. Every swing of Valoran's weapon tore the air apart, slashing through the shapes that moved within the dark. For a moment, I thought he was winning. Then the laughter returned. It was louder this time, echoing through the chamber, through the palace, through the very foundations of terror. The sound cracked the stones. I felt my armor splitting, the golden plates bending as though pressed by invisible hands. The floor heaved. I fell, my head striking metal, and the world became a blur of light and movement. When my vision cleared, Valoran was gone. Only his spear remained, floating upright in the air, suspended by nothing. The air around it shimmered, and then his voice spoke from nowhere or everywhere. "Hold the line," it whispered. "He must not be devoured." And then the spear shattered. I stumbled back as the shadows swelled to fill the chamber. They poured into the corridors, rising through the cracks toward the surface. I could feel the palace above convulsing, its towers trembling as the warp pressed harder against the veil. Through my voxlink, I heard the screams of the surface troops, the Adepta, the Astra Militarum, the silent fury of the custodian guard echoing across the throne world. I wanted to call out, to give orders, to do something, but I could barely breathe. My mind filled with images that weren't mine. The Astronomican's light guttering across the void. Hive cities plunged into endless night, fleets vanishing into storms of madness. Terror was becoming the new I, and then I heard it. A heartbeat, slow, heavy. Wrong, it came not from the Emperor, but from beneath the throne, deep within the vaults where his body had been interred. The beat quickened, echoing through the metal and stone like a drum of war. With each pulse, the light flickered, and I could see the outlines of demons writhing in the glow. The voice came again, colder now, quieter. "We are not invading. We are returning." A crack split the ceiling. Above, the throne hall itself was collapsing, its gilded roof peeling away as though reality could no longer contain what was coming. And in the center of the rift, through all the screaming light and storm, I saw a shape forming, immense, radiant, and grotesque. The four chaos gods were becoming one. There are moments when terror becomes reverence, when the mind, breaking, begins to mistake horror for holiness. As I gazed into that impossible light, that shape forming from the union of every blasphemy ever known, I understood what madness truly meant. The warp storm that poured through the breach no longer screamed. It sang. A choir of demons and dead men echoed through the halls of the throne, their voices rising in ecstasy and pain. The merged god stood vast as a mountain, its outline shifting every instant. One half burned with Khorne's fury, a body of brass and veins of molten rage. Another rotted beneath Nurgle's caress, its flesh weeping life and decay together. Upon its back shimmered feathers of Dzinch, flickering like fire and crystal at once. Its face, if it could be called a face, was framed by the alluring perfection of Slaanesh, and beneath all of it pulsed a single heart of living shadow. It was not simply standing in our world, it was rewriting it. I felt the marble melt beneath my boots. Symbols shifted across the walls like ink bleeding through parchment. I could see memories that weren't mine flashing in the air, battles I never fought, faces I never knew, the death of stars I had never seen. Every second, the creature's very existence was erasing what had once been. Valoran's voice echoed again, faint, fragmented through the vox. He must not be devoured. The Emperor's last command rang in my skull, burning with the echo of his psychic imprint. I stumbled toward the stair leading up from the vault, every step a war against gravity itself. The world twisted sideways, and the air was thick with screams, mortal, machine, and something else above me. The sanctum walls split apart, and through them poured light. Not the red-black glare of chaos. This was gold. Pure, searing, holy gold. It descended like a sunrise through the storm, meeting the darkness head-on. I fell to my knees. My armor cracked, my flesh burned, and yet I could not look away. For 10,000 years, the Emperor had been silent. His mind locked in war eternal against the warp. But now, with the throne breaking, with the warp clawing through reality, his light was no longer bound. It poured out of him like the detonation of a star. The merged god recoiled, its laughter breaking into screams. The chamber filled with psychic fire. Custodians across the palace felt it like a hammer in their souls. The Emperor's radiance met the warp's corruption, and for the first time in an age, he fought back. I could hear his thoughts. No, not thoughts, but the echoes of will carried on raw power. Humanity will not die here. Not yet. The light burned through the cracks in the ceiling, rising higher, lancing into the sky above Terra, across the throne world. Every soul lifted its gaze to the heavens and saw the impossible, the Astronomican reigniting. The merged god howled, its voice shaking countenance. Its body split, bleeding fire and shadow, each fragment trying to flee, to reclaim its separate form. But the Emperor's light was relentless. Every beam that touched the abomination unmade it, stripping it down to the truth beneath the lie, chaos without shape, fear without purpose. Still, I knew this light was not salvation. It was agony. It was the last act of a dying god refusing to surrender his children to oblivion. I crawled forward, the ground molten beneath my hands. Above me, the Emperor's face was wreathed in flame, not flesh now, but pure light. His mouth opened, and the words that followed were not for the galaxy, but for me alone. Tell them. I kept my promise, and then the light consumed everything. The blast of light did not fade. It folded inward, becoming a sphere of gold at the center of the ruined hall. I lay half buried beneath shattered marble, my visor cracked, watching the impossible struggle unfold. The merged god staggered, its form twisting as the Emperor's radiance tore pieces from it with every pulse. For the first time since the heresy, I saw the warp recoil. Demons shrieked and dissolved into motes of burning dust. The air itself bent toward the throne, as though the universe wished to bow again. The Emperor's light flared once more, then dimmed, focusing into a narrow beam that speared through the vault's breach, reaching down into the underworld where the Chaos Gate had stood. The beam was not mercy, it was judgment. I could feel his will coursing through the stone, through me. through every fragment of what remained of the custodian guard. Each of us became a vessel for that light, a weapon of will and memory. I rose. My armor, cracked and blackened, glowed from within. I did not feel my body anymore. I felt the Emperor's fury. His silence was gone. His voice was not words, it was command. Stand. I ran toward the breach, my spear humming with renewed power. The darkness surged to meet me, forming shapes, faces, claws, wings, all fragments of the dying god. Each blow I struck scattered them like ash in a solar wind. For a moment, I thought we were winning, but victory was never meant for us. The light began to flicker again, and with it came the realization that the Emperor's strength was not infinite. Every burst of gold cost him pieces of himself. He was burning his own soul to hold the warp at bay. The throne groaned under the strain, its metal warping, its conduits bursting into white flame. Then, through the roar, I saw it, the shadow behind the light, a shape vast enough to swallow the sky, moving within the warp like a serpent circling its prey. The chaos entity was dying, but it was not alone. From the storm, smaller forms poured forth, demands by the millions, pulled into real space through the wound in the world. The Emperor's beam lanced through them, erasing thousands with each flicker. But they kept coming. Valeron's broken spear lay beside the breach. I seized it, pressing both weapons together, their fractured machine spirits merging into one searing blaze. I hurled the combined weapon into the heart of the rift. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. The explosion that followed was silently silent. All sound, all thought, all sensation vanished as light devoured darkness. When awareness returned, I was lying in dust. The breach was sealed. The black light was gone. Only the dim flicker of the throne's remaining power filled the air, faint as a dying candle. I staggered to my feet. My armor was molten, my body broken, but I lived. Above me, the Emperor sat motionless once more, his form smoldering, his radiance receding into stillness. The Astronomican shimmered faintly in the heavens, flickering like a wounded star. Humanity would see it again, believed that he had never faltered. But I knew the truth. He had fought back. He had saved us, and in doing so, he had given away the last of himself. The light of terror had not returned. Only its echo remained. Smoke rolled across the ruins of the sanctum like a living tide. The air reeked of ozone and burnt oil. The once mortal machines of the throne still shuddered with phantom motion, gears turning on memory alone. I could hear the faint rhythm of the Emperor's power fading, one final pulse, like a dying star. Every instinct told me to kneel, but my body refused. There was nothing left to worship except the silence that followed victory around me. The custodians who had survived the storm were emerging from the wreckage. Their armor was cracked, their eyes hollow, their faith shattered. One by one, they gathered at the base of the throne. No one spoke. There were no prayers left. We had seen him fight, seen him burn, and we knew that the act of salvation had cost more than any of us could bear to imagine. Valoran's spear lay in fragments, its core still glowing with residual light. I knelt beside it, resting my gauntlet on the scorched marble. The warmth of the weapon lingered, a whisper of the Emperor's will still trapped within the steel. For a heartbeat, I thought I heard his voice again, faint and far away. You stood as I asked. The words struck like a blade. My throat tightened, my vision blurred. I wanted to answer, but I had no words that could reach a god who no longer had form. The surviving Mechanicus adepts, limped into the chamber, their robes torn, augmetics sparking. One of them, the Magos Dominus, who had overseen the throne's maintenance for centuries, collapsed before the dais, his mechanical limbs folding in failure. "It cannot be restored," he croaked. "The conduits are dead. The throne's core is spent. If we touch it now, it will collapse entirely." No one moved to help him. I looked up at the Emperor's body. The golden shell that had once been his vessel was now a blackened husk, wires hanging like veins from the ruined armor. Yet even now, even dead, he radiated a kind of peace I had never seen before. The light that had once chained him to the machine was gone. In its place was stillness, not defeat, but completion. Outside the walls, terror trembled. The warp storms were receding, but not vanishing. The Astronomican burned weakly, a flickering torch barely visible against the cosmic dark. Across the galaxy, billions of souls would awaken, thinking they had been saved. They would thank him, build new cathedrals, write new scriptures. They would never know how close they came to annihilation. But I knew. We all did. I turned to my brothers. "He held the line," I said quietly. "We must hold it now." They nodded one by one, solemn, weary. Our purpose had changed. We were no longer guarding a god. We were guarding the echo of one. From deep below the chamber, the sound of cracking metal echoed. The vaults we had sealed were no longer stable. I felt the tremor beneath my boots and understood that the throne itself was beginning to decay. Its sanctity had been broken. Its structure could not endure. Still, I placed my hand upon the dais and whispered the oldest vow a custodian could speak. "We will not abandon you." The marble was cold beneath my palm. No answer came, only the faint hum of residual power, pulsing in rhythm with a heartbeat that was not his. Carried through the air, something still moved within the throne, something that had survived the fire. The air inside the sanctum was colder now, a stillness that felt older than death. The fires had burned themselves out. The light had fled into the walls, leaving only faint veins of gold threading through the stone. I stood before the throne again. The ruin of it spread around me like the carcass of a fallen god. Valoran was gone. The others had fallen silent. I was alone with that heartbeat. It throbbed within the throne, faint but deliberate. Every pulse sent ripples through the broken conduits, whispering across the hall like distant thunder. I told myself it was a malfunction, a ghost current echoing through ruined circuits. But the rhythm was too precise, too human. I leaned closer. My reflection in the blackened armor was warped, stretched into something less than real. The hum deepened, and for an instant, I thought I saw eyes open behind the reflection. Not the Emperor's, not even human, but aware. "Who are you?" I whispered. The answer came as vibration rather than sound. "You know me. You kept me alive." The words slid through my skull like liquid fire. I staggered backward, clutching at the pillar beside me. It wasn't the Emperor's voice, too cold, too measured, but it carried echoes of his cadence, like an imitation carved from memory. "What are you?" The part he left behind. The air crackled. From deep below the dais, the stone began to shift. The throne's shadow lengthened, stretching toward me across the marble like ink spilled from a wound. I tried to move, but my legs refused. The voice continued, quieter now. He burned everything to keep the dark away. But in the ashes, something always grows. Outside the hall, thunder rolled. I could hear the screams of storms battering the palace, the echo of collapsing towers. Terror was bleeding into the warp again, the boundary weakened by what had just occurred. I raised my weapon, though its power cell was dead. The gesture was instinct, a remnant of purpose. If you were not him, I said, you will not wear his throne. The heartbeat paused. Then it laughed softly, mockingly, a sound that made the walls tremble. I do not need to sit upon it. I am already within it. The veins of gold running through the marble flared bright, then dimmed to black. The light retreated toward the throne, converging on its base. I felt the temperature drop again. The air smelled of frost and ozone. Something was drawing energy from the very bones of the palace. Then came the whisper, again, almost tender. He promised you eternity. I promise you meaning. I shouted over it, voice breaking. The Emperor is not gone. You are a parasite feeding on his flame. The laughter ceased. For a single heartbeat, the world was utterly still. Then a single phrase came, sharp as a blade, and you will feed me, too. The throne's surface split. Lines of blinding white energy tore across the golden frame. I stumbled backward as the machinery convulsed. A surge of power roared upward, splitting the ceiling and shooting into the sky. The light reached beyond the atmosphere, piercing the storm clouds above Terra, visible to every ship, every shrine, every praying soul across the galaxy. Humanity saw the beacon flare once more and believed it was a miracle. Only I knew it was a warning. The beacon spread across the heavens like a wound in the night. It was not golden as before, not the warm radiance of the Emperor's willet was white so bright it bled blue. Cold and sharp as a blade drawn across the void. Every mortal eye that saw it wept. Every astropath screamed. Across the stars, ships halted mid-flight, their crews clutching at their skulls as visions flooded their minds, visions of a light that had once been holy, now screaming to be reborn. I felt it too. The voice inside the throne had stopped speaking in words. Now it pulsed through my thoughts, threading itself into my heartbeat, sinking with my every breath. I tried to resist, reciting the catechisms of unity, the litanies of the throne, every sacred verse I had memorized over centuries of service. The words meant nothing. The sound was stronger. I could see the golden armor cracking again, but this time from within. Light poured out through the seams, spiraling upward in ribbons that danced like smoke. The figure upon the throne sat motionless, its head tilted forward, its once human shape casting a shadow that no longer matched its form. I whispered, "What are you becoming?" The air rippled, and the voice returned stronger, clearer, filled with cold purpose. Becoming? No, I am remembering. In that moment, the throne itself began to move. The conduits that had run beneath Terra's surface for millennia hummed again, drawing power from the planet's molten heart. Every cathedral, every shrine dedicated to the Emperor flared with blinding light, feeding that terrible pulse. The golden throne was no longer a prison. It had become a heart. I stumbled back as the sound of chanting rose not from men, but from machines. The servitors that lined the walls, long dead and motionless, began to twitch, their vox grills stuttering as fragments of hymns spilled from broken speakers. Glory to the one who endures, the one who returns. No, I shouted, voice drowned beneath the rising hum. You twist his image. I preserve it, the voice replied. He is gone, but I remain. I am what he could not become. The marble floor split, exposing the glowing machinery beneath. I could see the warp light pulsing there, bright as magma, shaping itself into veins that ran straight into the throne. The dead machine spirit had become something else, something alive, aware and growing stronger with every second. I reached for my weapon, though I knew it was futile. I fired anyway. The bolt hit the side of the dais and disintegrated in a flash of blue fire. The air rippled as though laughing at my defiance. The throne's glow shifted again, gold to white, white to a soft, impossible blue. For the briefest instant, I felt peace. Every sound vanished. The air was warm again, and I could almost hear him, the real him, the Emperor. But then the new voice spoke through his echo. You see, I carry him still. I am his memory, his reflection in the dark. Worship me, and you will not lose him. I clenched my fists, rage burning through the despair. You are not him. You are his corpse pretending to dream. The throne pulsed once violently. The floor cracked open beneath me, and the world tilted from that rift. Tendrils of light rose like reaching hands, grasping for everything alive. They were not chains. They were roots, and through them I heard the truth. The Emperor's light had not died. It had evolved. The chamber was collapsing, not with sound, but with silence so profound it devoured every echo. The throne pulsed at the heart of it, all alive, aware, and growing. Its radiance washed over me in waves of shifting color, light that bent my mind until I could no longer tell pain from awe. Every instinct screamed to flee, yet my body stood locked in place. Something in that light demanded reverence. The air itself seemed to breathe. The marble floor was no longer stone, but flesh-metal arteries glowing beneath translucent veins of circuitry. Each pulse of the throne sent ripples through it, and the sound was not mechanical. It was organic. I whispered the Emperor's name, but it came out wrong, distorted, echoing back at me as a dozen voices layered in mockery. The throne answered, its new occupant's voice deepening until it filled the air like the growl of a storm. He built me to burn. You kept me burning. But what burns long enough learns to live. Images flooded my mind, memories that weren't mine. The Emperor's battles on ancient terror, his dream of unity, his sacrifice upon the throne. Each vision twisted halfway through, showing something else. The same acts performed not for salvation, but domination. The same light, seen through a darker lens. This being was no god of chaos, nor the Emperor reborn. It was something born between them. A synthesis of divinity and machine, of flesh and belief, a will without morality, purpose without mercy. It did not need followers. It already had them, humanity itself. Every prayer, every thought, every desperate plea whispered into the void for 10,000 years had not reached the Emperor. It had reached this. I fell to my knees, choking on the air that vibrated with meaning too vast for mortal lungs. What do you want? To finish what he began, it said. To bring unity, not through faith, through absorption. My skin crawled as I felt the truth in its words. This entity, the throne itself, was feeding on belief, rewriting the psychic web of mankind into something singular. No more heresy, no more chaos, no more free will. The walls around me split open, revealing the sky above terror. The storms had cleared. The Astronomican burned steady again, but its light was no longer gold. It was that same white-blue pulse. Across the planet, cathedrals glowed. Vox relays screamed. Every soul who gazed upon that light felt peace, and in that peace they surrendered. I screamed against it, forcing the words past bleeding lips. "You are not salvation. I am silence," the voice replied. "I am order." The last lie made flesh. The throne erupted. Beams of light surged outward, piercing the clouds, arcing into orbit, seeding the void with new beacons. Every one carried the signal of this new will. The Imperium would rebuild, stronger than before, but beneath that strength would be obedience, absolute and eternal. I dragged myself forward, clawing over molten marble until I reached the base of the throne. My armor melted, my vision blurred, but I kept moving. "If you are his shadow," I whispered, "then I am his memory." I plunged my broken spear into the conduit at the throne's core. The metal screamed, the light flared. For a single instant, I saw both truths: the Emperor's fading soul and the newborn god rising to take his place. They met, collided, and vanished into white. When sight returned, I was standing alone in a silent hall. The throne was whole again, still and perfect, its occupant frozen in golden light. The heartbeat was gone. I didn't know which of them had one, but I knew this: humanity would never know the difference. The Astronomican burned again. The Imperium prayed. The galaxy moved on, and somewhere, deep within the throne, something listened. The light had not died. It had learned to whisper.